Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our November 19th edition of OPI's Education Advocates meeting. We have several presentations for you today and updates from our various units here at the Office of Public Instruction. So we'll go ahead and get started with an ESSER update from Wendy Fons. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, thank you, Christy. So ESSER is moving along in its closeout process, and I will say both ESSER and EANS. And just to remind everyone, OPI did receive from the Department of Education a grace period extension to continue with the processing of these grants, not in terms of the spending deadline, but in terms of finalizing all the documentation that's required in closing out this large of a grant. So in addition to our receiving the ability to do that, we have passed that on to the districts, and we are continuing to process description-only amendments and cash requests as we go forward. So just a reminder, if you still have funds that you need to do a cash request for or an amendment on the budget side that needs to be updated, we are still doing that. The ESSER team is available Monday through Saturday. We have cell phones listed as well as Zoom sessions pretty much all the time. We have specific office hours that are from Wednesday and Thursday, 10:30 to 3:30. So you can hop on those. Those are just on our website link. And again, if you are sending us an email, one thing that really helps with regards to processing challenges as you go forward. I can't get into eGrants, or eGrants is giving me this error. If you can please put your school name and the LE number in the subject line, have a phone number that we can actually contact you on in the email. And probably one of the most important is to give us a screenshot. We really try and memorize all the various nuances of eGrants, but it seems to me that when we get colder, eGrants has a little stubborn aspect to it, and it will come up with very interesting error messages. So please help us out by providing those screenshots, either as an attachment or actually embedded within the email. That will help us support you better. Just one other point here is, as we close out ESSER, a lot of you have been asking about, do you need to continue to keep your ARP plans on your website? And unfortunately, the Department of Ed has continued to tell us, yes, you do. I'm going to guess that those are going to come off sometime next June, because the spending still happened this fiscal year. But we have not gotten compliance notification from the Department of Ed that we can, in fact, remove those. And then lastly, we will be doing a data collection for year 5. That's that long Excel spreadsheet. So look forward to that wonderful activity around in the April timeframe this coming spring. So that's pretty much it. That's all we have. If there are any questions that anyone has. Okay, thank you. I'll turn it back to Christy there. Thanks.
Thanks, Wendy, and thanks for all the work for your team working on the closeout. I know it's a lot and meeting with schools, but do reach out. The team is available to help all of your schools with that closeout. Okay, and then next we have a fall student count preliminary numbers share out with our Autumn Belmont, one of our OPI budget analysts here. Autumn, are you on the line?
Yeah, I got it covered.
Oh, all right. Thanks, Paul. Paul Taylor will share the information. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen if I can remember how to do that. Yeah, there's not a heap to. It's funny when you jump back and forth from Teams to Zoom. Just real brief, and I'm not real certain what I had sent out previously or if anything at all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on this in a second, but I'll just sort of lay the foundation. What I have here is 6 years of fall enrollment, or not necessarily enrollment, what is termed student count for A and B. Student count for A and B is not enrollment. Student count for A and B is a subset of enrollment. These are the students that count towards A and B funding. I had to do it a little bit different this year because there are unadjusted and adjusted counts. Historically, we've done it on unadjusted counts. The reason for making a change this year has everything to do with the charter school creation. What was happening was there was a large enough percent of part-time enrolled students that skewed the set of data. So let me collapse this a little bit. What I'm going to hide here are budget units. And then I'll just sort of zoom in a little bit. So just real briefly, I hope you can see that a little bit better. Here is fall of 25 back to fall of 2020. Remembering that 25 data is not finalized until the end of December. These unadjusted values make it appear as though enrollment was held flat between fall of 24 and fall of 25, meaning fiscal years, because it's finance division, we talk in fiscal years. What you may notice here is an enrollment decline to a low point. That was the COVID pandemic time. And then you could watch somewhat of a rebound going forward, a taper off once again, and now it appears to be held flat. That's sort of erroneous in nature because of what I'm about to show in the next chart. This table here is showing the adjusted student count for A and B. These adjustments are made for students who are attending part-time situations mainly. So what you may note is a student that attends half-time at their regular public school and half-time at the public charter school at the same district. In the unadjusted values, it would be one kid at the charter and one kid at the regular public, so the child was being double counted. And so what you'll see is because of the double counting, it appears as though there's no decline in enrollment between the 2 years. When you make the adjustments so that it shows 0.5 of a kid at the charter and 0.5 of the child at the regular public school, now we have a different picture. You can see that the state of Montana continues to have an enrollment decline using the adjusted student count for A and B. I think I saw a quote somewhere, it was like 1.2 or 1.3% decline over the year past. The next question that usually rolls in is, well, what's going on with non-public situation? Let me see if I can get this thing to show. That's helpful. I've shown before. Oh, wonder what I did. Oh, you know what? How much of one of that I did? Yeah, being patient with me. There it is. Somehow, by hiding it, it messed everything up for me. But okay, let's zoom in a little bit again. Unfortunately, I don't have a good picture to paint for the non-public situation because as of the time of the data being available, we didn't have Bighorn, Gallatin, or Sanders counties reporting for the public and, I'm sorry, for the homeschool and private school students. Move this over a little bit again. However, what you can see here is, oh my goodness, I'm all over the place. However, what you can see is there's not necessarily an uptick in home or private schools between 24 and 25, even with the missing 3 counties. So whereas prior to, during the time at which we had the COVID pandemic, you could see the uptick in homeschool, which is in opposition to the decline in public school. But now here we are looking at this set of data, and even with those 3 counties out, I don't know that we would see an inverse relationship. So I don't have any evidence to show why there's a decline in student count for A and B in the state of Montana. I'm just here to show the actual student counts. So that's what I got. I'm going to try to figure a way to stop sharing.
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
All I
Paul.
got.
Thank you so much. I don't see any. Oh, I see a question. Trish, you have a question. Go ahead.
Hi, Paul. This is Trish Schreiber. Question. I understand in the counting how you say the A and B counts do not equal enrollment. That totally makes sense. But
Mhm.
I'm wondering, do we have a number for how many, I mean, for lack of a better term, ghost students there are out there in these numbers? Like students who are being either double counted, because if we're looking at a 3-year average for A and B, there may be students counted in 2 districts, or they may have left the state and they're still being counted. Like, do we know what the hard enrollment numbers are?
Like I said, I don't have enrollment numbers. I have student count for A and B numbers.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we ever take the enrollment numbers?
Well, yeah, so what has to happen is on the first Monday of October and the first Monday of February, enrollment is collected. And so you'll have straight raw enrollment values. And then what we do with those values is we adjust those for students who are attending part-time situations at one site and part-time enrollment at other sites, and inclusive of other adjustments, students who don't count for A and B for other reasons. So the adjusted values that I was showing sort of in the middle of that short presentation, if you want to call it that, those are the students who count for A and B with the adjusted situations. If you wanted to see where a student went, like if they left the state or where they've moved to, you'd have to deal with that through raw enrollment, I believe. Yeah.
Right. So if we flip that, though, not so much focusing on the students that aren't there, but rather the students that are actually there. I understand the adjusted, and that was a great slide. Thank you. That was very helpful. But I guess what I'm saying is I'm just curious if we ever publish information about who's like actual enrollment numbers. I know you said we collected them, but then we do some adjustments. And because we're working on A and B, we're often working on 3-year averages. So I'm just wondering if we ever get a hard number about student enrollment.
Yeah, so in the GEMS area of the OPI website, there's a section on enrollment, and that information is actual enrollment information.
Awesome. Thank you.
Paul, just a follow-up from me, Wendy. In the GEM system, does that enrollment data include or take advantage of the halftime, or is it a head count? In other words, the charter school attending half in one and half in the other, would GEMS count it twice?
You'd
That's why
have
the numbers could be different.
um, you'd have to talk to people that collect enrollment information about that,
Okay.
what they're presenting there. I don't know what they do. I mean, like I deal with funding, so I don't know what they have.
Okay, thanks.
All right, we're going to move on to our next presentation on grant dollars for homeless children with Zach Hawkins. Good morning, Zach.
Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Zach Hawkins, Title I Federal Programs Director. I'm just going to give a quick summary of the American Rescue Plan Homeless Children and Youth 2, or what we call it, the OPI HCY 2 dollars. Those were monies that were allocated by Congress in 2021 to assist states in addressing the homeless crisis and increased numbers of homeless students associated with the pandemic. In Montana, we received $2,502,430 to address this. And a lot of this was driven by things such as increased housing costs across the state, also just economic difficulties related with the pandemic, unemployment, layoffs, things like that. And then also an increase in the number of refugees and students and families coming into Montana during that time. So there were 37 school districts who received funding from that allocation. And the funding was pretty flexible. Generally with federal funding, there's a lot of sort of strings attached. There's a lot of rules, but this funding was pretty flexible in terms of districts were able to really meet the basic needs of students. They could even, do things like buy clothing, buy groceries. They could upgrade some of their facilities like showers, things like that, to provide access for homeless families, to use those and for basic hygiene, things like that. Other things that were done, some districts really focused in on PD for their staff. How do we identify homeless students? We know across the state that homeless is often underreported, underidentified, in part because obviously families are oftentimes embarrassed about that situation. Students don't necessarily want to share with their teachers or with their school that they're homeless. So trying to help our staff understand how to identify and the different avenues that are available to homeless students and families by PD. Some districts also focused a lot on mental health supports because obviously there's a lot of mental health issues that will cause and can be a result of homelessness. And so in August of 2024, we had 13 districts that requested additional funding to provide some of those services. So the OPA reallocated $394,800 out to those 13 districts. 2 of those districts, Townsend and Billings, have actually requested an extension beyond the end of January, which is so the ARP HCY actually closed on September 30th. Districts had to have all of their funding obligated by that date. But the tidings waiver period that the Department of Ed puts out there gave them till the end of January or 120 days to expend those funds. But Townsend and Billings have requested an extension to continue services through the end of this school year. So the OPI has submitted that extension request out to the U.S. Department of Ed. We're still waiting to hear on that. And Billings they're really looking at building a more comprehensive homeless support program, something that's sustainable with that funding. They have increased staffing. They're really looking at how they can better track students, case management, and again, some of that PD that is necessary for staff to really understand and support homeless students. And Townsend has really provided a lot of, they've focused on that healthcare and mental health side. And so they have a contract that they want to extend to the end of the year to really focus in on that student and family mental health. And so I have a 1-pager here that Brian will be sharing in the meeting materials afterwards. It highlights a few other districts and some of the funding that they did, or some of the services that they did with that funding. So that's what I have on ARP HCY2. I think it's been a really important thing to serve our homeless students during this time period. And we were able to do some really good things with this funding. So I will stand for any questions.
All right, thanks, Zach. Appreciate your presentation this morning, and I don't see any questions. So we will move on to data modernization with Julia Caro. Julia is our Senior Data Operations Manager, and I think I saw her on the line, so there you
Hello,
are. Good morning, Julia.
good morning. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. So I'm Julia Caro, C-A-R-O, and I would like to share our progress with our PowerSchool data modernization project. The last time I spoke with this group, I was able to share that Kalispell's VPN was up and running, and I'm happy to report that we're working with both Billings and Great Falls now to stand up their VPN connections as well. Additionally, we're moving into dashboard fitting and the QA process for the data that is currently populating our new dashboards. And they are not ready for consumption yet, but we're getting very close, pretty excited. And of course, we continue to meet with our steering committee and participate with our education and workforce data governing committees work groups And we've recently delivered our most recent educational data integration legislative report in October. And I encourage you to check it out. It details the project progress and key insights of our data modernization project, and it can be found on our website. And I can take any questions.
All right. Thanks, Juliet. I don't see any hands or any questions, I don't think.
Awesome.
Okay, great. Next, we're on to, I'm up next, giving a quick public charter school update. And not a lot has changed on these, but we do have 17 currently open, 2 scheduled to open next year. The Board of Public Education has accepted new applications. They had their application period open. Those were due November the 1st to the Board of Public Education. They will then be reviewing those applications. And once any of those applications are approved, those districts will follow the school opening procedures. We have a link there. On our website, we have the school opening documents and information that those schools would need to then submit to the OPI in order to open those schools here in the upcoming spring. And just wanted to have that quick reminder there. And next, for our early literacy intervention update. Over the summer, we had about 500 students in 12 districts participate in a Jumpstart Early Literacy Intervention summer program. Right now, preliminary data is showing we have about 118 classrooms in 87 districts across the state, which is exciting for those early literacy intervention classrooms. And then home-based, we've allocated 1,400 home-based licenses provided out to schools who have then provided those licenses out to families. There are a few, just a very few licenses available. So if you are in a district and you have some students who need some early literacy intervention and the parents have requested they be screened for early literacy intervention screening, you could reach out to our early literacy specialists to request some more licenses. We do have a few left in that part of the program. And just as a reminder, these licenses do come with a device for the student. So if there's a family that doesn't have easy internet access or an easy device for the student to use, part of this program actually provides that. So make sure that you're aware of that. It can really help support some of our students that might not have that,
You can't hear. Okay.
technology. And then just one last reminder here, our early literacy specialists have hosted an early literacy learning series, particularly to support educators who are teaching in early literacy intervention classrooms. They have completed that series this fall, and they have recordings available online on our Teaching and Learning Literacy website there on our OPI's website. And you can find those really helpful early literacy strategies recordings available right there, and they have been very well attended and have gotten fantastic feedback from that series. So if you know a school or have a school that has an early literacy targeted intervention classroom, that might be a helpful support for those teachers or paraeducators in that classroom. And I think that's it for public charters and early literacy updates for today. If there's any questions. All right. And then our last agenda item today is with Deanne Wilcutt, and she's going to talk about cash requests. Good morning, Deanne. I saw you on there, so I know you're here.
I am.
Oh, hi, good morning.
Morning. Okay, I think, all right, Brian's got my document up here. What I needed to go through with everyone is based on recommendations and findings from our most recent audit. We are trying to provide better guidance and more detailed documentation directives for everyone doing cash requests, either paper or through e-grants, which is most every school and LEA statewide. So what the auditor and I put together was a little better detail. Does anyone need this to be a little bigger? Maybe a little would be perfect. Okay. hopefully everybody can see this just great. So we're going to implement these changes, and they're not significant changes. There's already a description field in every cash request that every LEA fills out when they make a submission with a description of the expenses they're requesting reimbursement for in that current month. What the auditors want us to ensure is that the detail is, I guess, consistent and easily followed by someone who really isn't familiar. You know, the auditors are not familiar with each grant. Can you put this document in the link chat, Brian? Can you do that? Thank you. So I can just run through it if people want, you know, starting with personal services, which is, you know, the salaries. They want the positions. We prefer positions to the employee's name for what the salaries are being paid for. If you have a special ed teacher salary for September 2024, and then specific duties, you know, you have a literacy grant, you're hiring a reading specialist to participate, you know, for literacy grant items. You're going to explain that, the time frame, the position, and the specific tasks or duties that they are being paid for. And then the employee benefits, it's going to mirror your personal services pretty close because that's going to be the benefit portion of their checks. Purchased professional and technical services in the 300s. And just before I go, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of, we do realize that some LEAs code a few, especially between, I think, 300 and 500. Some of them have ways that their audit staff have directed them and they do it consistently. And I think that this detail will help avoid some of the questions that currently come from the grant accountants when they're reviewing cash requests. But we do realize that there is a little bit of, there's a few different ways that people do it, and it's fine. We're not here to really split hairs on that today, but I think this'll help. Again, the service dates covered, you know, September 2024. The specific services, and under the purchased and professional and technical services, those are contracted services. So that is sometimes one of the questions we get is this a contract, or is this just something that doesn't have a contract attached to it? And one question the auditors, I will say, added that they asked us a lot, and it was a very exact, is why is this expense allowable under this grant? For most purchased services or items, they want that included. So you'll see it under 400 again, you know, the dates, what it is, why is it allowable. For other purchase services, the dates, the service. If there's a unit component to it, the unit and the number of units, why is the expense allowable under the grant? Supplies and materials, same thing, unit cost, number of units, dates you're purchasing. We understand this doesn't change, you know, if you're purchasing a bunch of iPads and they're going to be handed out between September and October, you know, they're not all getting handed out in the same month. This doesn't change any allowability there. That's still fine. But why is it allowable? You know, and maybe, let's see, supplies and materials, same thing, units, cost, date range. Yep, this document is going to be sent out. We are going to go through this with a few groups, and then it'll also get sent out eventually through the GovDelivery, so that every LEA gets it. And we will try to be very clear in our communication as to when they're going to start, when our true implementation date of this is going to be. It would be great as people are getting used to it to start even before we have a hard firm date on it over the next, you know, however many weeks or couple months. The auditors do want us to implement it fairly quickly. But then property and equipment, again, you know, unit cost, you're buying to a store, when, you know, there's, I don't know, a lot of things. Property and equipment's a little more specific, but the date range of purchase covered by the payment. And again, why are they allowable under the grant? And then for the other, the same thing, date range, unit, you know, the Oh, I guess we need to take one out of there. We have dates covered in that one twice. And then why are they allowable? So hopefully for most LEAs, that's not a huge change. A lot of them do a real nice job of including most of this data already in their description. We did get a question just in conversation from one who wanted to do receipts instead. And that is absolutely, you know, a simpler description, and putting receipts in is fine. The auditors originally asked why we didn't have receipts for all transactions, and we explained just the amount of work that is for everyone to gather and submit. The fact that there's audits done at schools already where they check that, we really didn't think that was an appropriate solution. So we kind of agreed to hold off on that for now, but we have some that want to submit that just to make sure that it's easy and clear, and that is totally fine. The system will, you know, allows the upload of the receipts. So that is an acceptable alternative. And then this is the last sentence on here isn't really anything new. What when we have grants that actually end, which is not very often, you know, usually there's a new grant following for the next year, but ESSER is my example. As we're closing ESSER, we are already and will continue to have submissions now that we're past September 30th. For things that were an obligation prior to September 30th, we will be asking for confirmation, you know, a documentation or something to confirm that it was obligated by the obligation deadline. So that word is a reminder to folks, but that is nothing new. We've done that with other grants at times just to make sure, because that is something we frequently get asked for if they're looking at grants during an audit period that actually ended completely during that audit period. So not huge changes, but hopefully very clean, lined out cleanly so that it's easier for folks to follow. Are there any questions? Beyond my removing that one duplicated line and getting this as we move forward to send it out.
Thanks, Deanne. Oh, it looks like there's a question. Is there a question?
Actually,
Oh,
if I
Wendy.
could just to kind of add with that with regards to wonderful ESSER and how it impacts those object codes. Thanks, Deanne, for sharing all of that. As we close out ESSER, two of the major areas that we're looking at are those salaries and benefits, the 100 and 200s. There's been sort of a syntax or a formula used over the last 2 years. And it's pretty easy to follow, as Deanne talked about it. So it's just an FTE and then the title of the position and the grades level. So it's a pretty simple piece in there. And then as Deanne mentioned, we do need to have it go back to how is this allowable under ESSER? So that prepare, prevent, respond, PPR language that's in there. And then in the 600 and 700 categories, if they're large projects dealing with that property and equipment, there are prior approvals that are done, and those also have a very clear syntax for what needs to be front and center in those descriptions. And that really takes care of most of the changes that you might need to look at, because the title does indicate that it's a facility or that it's a transportation vehicle, and it has board approval date as well as OPI date right in the title itself. So those things should be pretty straightforward, but do keep that in mind. Those are things that as we close out ESSER and meet with the schools, we are covering that in addition. So it'll be sort of a mini training on what Deanne was sharing there with you.
Thanks, Wendy. And I apologize. I thought my video was on the whole time and I just realized it wasn't. So I was talking to you in the dark.
Thanks, Deanne. All right, it doesn't look like there are any other questions. And so we have wrapped up our November 19th Education Advocates meeting. Thank you all for joining us. Brian, as always, will send out the recording and the attachments and any of those screen shares that you saw. Brian will follow up with an email and send that out to all of you. So you have that in your inboxes as soon as he has that ready to go. Thank you all. And as always, reach out with any questions. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.